welcome back, everyone, to Master of the Universe Horror Podcast. Son of a bitch, dude. It's fucking number 14, I do believe, on our road to 100, dude. So Joey Cage here with Christopher J, everyone's favorite podcaster. How's it going tonight, Chris?
Doing good, sir. It's all good, man.
And Mark. Oh, wait a minute. Someone's being a piece of shit. That's how could I forget, dude? So Mark's too busy counting his money, dude. And people think we're lying about him, dude. But that people just throw you food and throw him money, dude. But I don't know. Something about this whole throwing shit at people is starting to, it's coming more and more true. Anyway, we're bringing you guys.
So does no one ever throw you anything?
They throw a lot of bullshit at me. That's what they throw, dude. I mean, I got stories. I was on a podcast today about stories of, crazy ladies and multiple crazy ladies. But, that'll be for a different podcast. I mean, it's a horror podcast, but, we're going to talk about Freddy, not about a bunch of crazy hood rats, dude. Not going to do that.
Not about people, doing Uber rides and then getting DoorDash.
Oh my God! So that'll be for tomorrow when I trash you talking about DoorDash and then doing Uber rides because it's so ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, hey, I went ahead and did my Ubering and picked up some Wingstop, dude. So I call it like I see it, dude. I and you go, hey Joe, you could have gone to the store, just picked up some chicken, saved yourself that, but you're a piece of shit. I thought about it, but I'm like, nah, dude. Just the way the Wingstop shit tastes, you know what I mean? Like, I can't make my ranch the way Wingstop makes theirs. I know it's not too hard, but.
And I've tried with all kinds, whether my own handmade tenders or whether it's, the Tyson in the 3-pound bag at Costco. You are never gonna make garlic parm tenders like Wingstop.
Yeah, or the Atomic, dude. Like, it's so like you can make something hot. It's not a real problem, but. Like, their stuff is, like, hot, but it's tasty. That Atomic sauce, dude. So, I'm forever in their debt. If I could just buy a bunch of chicken thighs and throw that hot shit on there, I'd be doing it. But, I mean, I can't do it. So, fucking do that. So, before we get into the podcast, today's a special day, isn't it, Chris?
Yes, if you're a devout Catholic, you know that today is the feast of the 40 Martyrs. So today is one of 3 feasts during the season of Lent where you do not have to abstain from anything or fast from anything, dietary restrictions or anything like that, because in the daily masses of these kind of days, there's a Gloria, there's a Hallelujah said, and there's also a Our Father and the Creed said. Normally those things are not done in a daily mass, but because it's a celebratory feast, this one, March 9th, Feast of the 40 Martyrs, March 19th, Solemnity of St. Joseph, and March 25th, which is the Annunciation to the Virgin Mary. Even if Lent falls on those days, you do not have to fast from anything on those days.
So you heard it, folks, from the Sunday school teacher. So if you hear this, maybe of course days later, today's March the 9th. If you're like, what the fuck's he talking about? It's March the 9th. So
hey, can I just real quick tell the story of today's feast?
Of course, man.
Okay, today the significance of this feast is the hand I open beer with.
I was waiting for it.
No, for real. Today, the significance of this feast is that in 320 AD, in present-day Turkey, which at the time was Armenia, 40 Roman soldiers had been found out to be Christians. And they had been assembled together by some officers and told, if you do not renounce your faith, you will be put to death. We're going to. It was a freezing cold night, and Turkey is like at level with like Maryland or Pennsylvania, so it's mountainous, so it's a pretty cold place. So we got this lake over here. It's freezing cold. It's icy at the top. And we're going to throw you in and let you freeze to death if you don't renounce your faith. Of those 40, one of them renounced his faith, and they let him go into one of the military officer palaces and go into like a warm water bath and stuff like that because he renounced his faith. But then what happened was one of the officers who was guarding these guys, who was going to put them to death, he on the spot converted to Christianity and got thrown into the icy lake.
shit.
They left these people. Icy Lake, yeah, it was icy at the top. It was water underneath, but it was icy at the top. And so they left these. They threw these guys in this icy water, and in this cold weather, let them freeze in that water overnight, and they brought their bodies out in the morning, and they were still alive, and they didn't think they were going to survive that.
Sounds like when my ex-wife left me.
That's about right. They brought them out of the water, and they were still alive. So what they did was they made a fire, and they threw every single one of them into this fire and let them burn to ashes. Wow. And they then took the ashes and threw them into this fast-moving river. But the local Christians gathered up their clothing as relics. So the Armenian Church still holds these relics today, and so that's why today is the feast of those 40, and we believe that they were assumed immediately into heaven, did not have to go to purgatory because they were martyrs.
Son of a bitch, dude. Well, there's your fucking history lesson. Never heard of it, but yeah, I'm glad I did, dude. So we're gonna have to, I guess we're gonna have to start doing that, dude. Having this day in history, whatever day we're doing this in, if it was a day of something like that in the Bible, or AC/DC released a rock album, whatever it is, we'll talk about it, man. So before the show, give people a little something extra. But today we're continuing the Nightmare on Elm Street 5, or we're continuing the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise with a Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. And this has been a long motherfucking time coming. We've never gotten to do Freddy's Dead, which will hopefully be next weekend or next week. Last time we did Nightmare on Elm Street 5 was me, Mark, and Jason from 2018, right, Chris? It was when we had released that shit?
It was March of 2018. Yep.
Yeah, so it's been damn near 2 years. Can you believe that? That's crazy, right? How fast time flies, and how much shit can happen and before you know it, So me and Chris decided to carry on the banner of horror movies and Master of the Universe, and doing some of movies in general, because Mark's too much of a lazy piece of shit to watch newer movies. If he saw it 10 years ago, dude, that's it. He's not going to watch it again, dude. So me and him decided to start doing this, and then especially because Chris got me this Roku, man. And I will tell you, I'm not an ass kisser or anything, but god dang, dude, I was missing out before I had got this Roku, because there's like I'm the kind of guy that will watch the same movies over and over, and I would collect DVDs, and like watching the Roku or having a Roku has kept me from spending money on DVDs or anything like that, because I'm like nonstop watching movies that I've never had, movies that I probably would have never sat there and watched, movies that I remember going to like the rental store and seeing but never wanted to like rent it, but now it's like, well, let me watch it for 20 minutes, let me see what it's all about, right? And there's been so many fucking times like that the past like few months that it's like the greatest thing. So we decided to start doing the reviews, especially now that we're both able to say, hey, watch so and so movie, it's on the Pluto app or the Crackle app or the Stars app, Showtime, and all that other shit. So we'll be doing more of them in the upcoming, hopefully, weeks, months, years, whatever it is, just for fun, shit and giggles and all that good stuff. But Chris, I mean, before we get into Nightmare 5, dude, let's talk about the first 4 Nightmare on Elm Streets, man. If you had to rank those 4, before we go into detail for those ones and then we get into part 5, if you had to rank the first 4, how would you put them, dude? How would you put them in your order there?
I'm gonna go with 1, 3, 2, 5, 4.
1, 3, 2, 5, 4. Okay, so you like 5 a little bit better than 4. So number 1's your favorite, dude. What makes number 1 your favorite?
I think what makes number 1 my favorite, and only by a hair beyond 3, because I think 3 is a more profound, more interesting story.
Yeah.
But 1 is just because it's a super dark, super evil, super menacing, super strong character that you don't understand the nature of his power or what he is or who he is or why he's doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've kind of gone back and forth with 1 and 3 for that exact same reason, because I'm like, it's hard for me to do like a best of or a ranking for anything, just because it's like you feel one way in a day or whatever, but like especially just for like this, for example, part 1 and part 3. I think most people will say part 1 or part 3 is the best film in the franchise. And if you say, well, which one do you have more fun with? Well, I probably have a lot more fun with part 3. I think the deaths are better, a lot more going on. But then you want horror, right? You want to just sit there and be scared. It's the first one, and not that the third one's not scary, because I think the third one's really got some really badass, scary parts. And they're both the same character, but the way like part 1 is presented is like you really like. At least for me, I sit there and think like, man, imagine there's this guy who's like in your dreams that kills you, and it's this Freddy, not the Freddy from part 3. You're like, that first one is scary because you don't really see him. You just see like the silhouette of him like most of the time in the first one, and you're like, wow, that's fucked up, that look and the sweater and everything else, and how everyone's kind of isolated. There's like no one that really has like part 3. They're around each other, most, and they have like they can kind of engage with each other what's going on. But part 1, it's like everyone, when it happens to them, they're just asleep in the room just like everyone else, like in the real world. It's like when you go home to your bed at night, you're going to be alone, and it's like that's what's scary about part 1 is that you're in the dream alone, you're in bed alone a lot of the time. So, but
and they don't know till toward the end, exactly who this Fred Krueger is and what his history is and how he's getting at them and stuff. And I mean, it's not. I said what I said about the first one, why I like it, and they don't know why it's happening, all this stuff. But it's not like Hellraiser where there's zero explanation at all the whole movie,
yeah.
And then the second one just builds off what they built in the first one. No, this was like there is some answers and some resolution and some course of action based on that information in the first one.
Yeah, and part 3, like it's a lot more. Everything's already built on, from the first one, so they don't have not much explanation other than, well, Freddy was the son of 100 maniacs and shit like that. They built the lore a little bit more. But yeah, the first one, like I can imagine, and I think I remember seeing it as a kid when you hear like that little that surprise that Kane is alive, Undertaker. When you hear that surprise that Fred Krueger can't hurt you anymore. He's dead. And they'd say like that like 20 years ago or whatever it was that he would kill the kids in the neighborhood, so all the parents went after him and they killed him, and you're like, wow, that's scary. Like she's having a dream about this guy that was like a child killer, before she was born or when she was a kid or whatever the case is, and you're like, damn, that's pretty scary that that this guy, he's in their dreams, but he was a real fucking maniac in the real world. So it's like, wow, but anyway, part 4. So we'll talk about 2 and 4 since they were the ones after. What makes part 2 a little bit better than 4, or what makes part 2 better than 5 and 4 for you?
I mean, it's just there's still a mystique to the Freddy character. There's still like an evil scariness, and it's not it's not this comedic or ridiculousness or grossness. Like part 4, some of that was just flat out like yuck, gross.
Yuck.
Honey, it's getting close to midnight, and all the myths are still in town. True love and lipstick on your linen. Bite the pillow, make
Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child. Chris, you want to spit some facts about Nightmare on Elm Street 5 that you know or read about, so let the fans know a little bit about the motherfucker?
Don't mind if I do. So, part 5 in the saga that is Freddy and the Nightmare on Elm Street, released on August 11th, 1989. So that would have been right around the time our friend Marky Dangerously would have been starting 3rd grade.
When he was just a little piece of shit. Yeah.
When he was just a little Ebenezer Scrooge. Mm-hmm. No, but if you remember his story from the one that with Jason, Epic Jason. He said that this was the last time he went to go see a movie with his dad.
Oh, yeah. It was like he did say that. Yeah, go ahead. Dude.
It was like a Saturday or some shit, and he took him to a seafood restaurant. Then after that, they went to go see this.
Yeah, I remember he said that. He's like, it's the last time that they went. Yeah, I do remember him saying that. I think I actually reposted that show on the channel. So if you type in Nightmare on Elm Street 5 or just go through the videos, you'll probably see another one like this, but it was with me, Mark, and Jason where he talks about it. It's been so long, I can't remember shit what he was saying, but I remember him talking about them going to the movies for that shit.
Yeah, so, and the budget on this one is $8 million according to Wikipedia.
That's a lot.
Box office is $22.2 million, so just under 300% return.
Yeah, it's a good return. Like it was successful, but a lot of people, of course, because the previous one did really well. I think the previous one, it says it was on a 6.5 million and it made like almost 50 million on the. So they, it was a successful film, but not compared to part 4. And they gave it a big budget because the part 4 was such a success. They went right around, and it was less than a year when they had started work on this film and editing. Like I had, was reading about it, and the director Stephen Hopkins, I think his name is, and he directed Predator 2. So I love Predator 2. I know a lot of people don't like Predator 2, but I love it. But he's the one that did this one. He talks about how like he only had 4 weeks to shoot this movie and then 4 weeks to edit it. And I'm like, and I think about that and I'm like, wow, dude, I know when Star Wars was done, they had like almost like a whole, I don't know for sure, but it was almost like a whole year of editing and filming back and forth. That shows the difference between Disney and New Line Cinema.
Yeah, that's really short because think about this. I mean, Back to the Future Part 1, just the filming alone, and part of this was because they had to reshoot the scenes. They added an extra 2 weeks because they had to reshoot the scenes with Michael J. Fox instead of Eric Stoltz. But they had 6 weeks to film, and you're talking about 4 weeks to film and edit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can't wait to talk about Back to the Future because that's like another film, and then especially the first one, like that has so much crazy shit that you're like, wow, I didn't know this, and all the connections. But yeah, it's 4 weeks to film, and they were talking about how like they would have one set right next to each other, and the actors would just change real quick and go on to the next one because they were on such a tight schedule, and it kind of shows on this film because like it's not like polished like I don't think any of them have great amazing acting, but this one is kind of like it shows the acting and like the story. It doesn't seem, you could poke holes in like any story, I think, even like the Dark Knight and these other newer ones, like they're whatever, but this one it just seems like they're like, well, what can we think of? And when we had talked about actually doing this film, and you had told me something about what you thought the film was about. You really surprised me because, of course, I'm a Nightmare on Elm Street fan. I'm a horror fan, so I listen to like podcasts, reviews, and everything about these films, especially like the Freddy ones and shit. And it's always cool to hear someone else's perspective or take on a film that is like completely their own, and they didn't regurgitate from hearing from somewhere else. And you had mentioned about the child in this film and what your take on it was, and I had never heard that from anybody else, and I was like, wow, that's interesting, and I thought it was really cool to hear it from you. So what's so you're explaining this film to somebody that's never seen A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5. They know all the other Freddys, right? But they're like, hey, well, I've seen only up to Part 4. What's Nightmare 5 about? And you have to explain, like, not in ridiculous detail, but like a 1 or 2 minute explanation on who's this, why is it called the Dream Child, and what's going on. Like, go ahead. You have a minute or two, Chris. Explain the Dream Child to me.
Okay, so this movie is basically where Alice, she's a carryover character from Part 4. She had been one of the friends of those fraternal twins, the boy-girl twins in Part 4.
Yeah.
Forgive me, I don't recall their names. But
Rick. His name is Rick, right? Rick, yeah.
Rick, yeah, that's right. And so she carries over into this one, and what do you call it? She's with Dan, which was the uncharismatic football player jock who was nice to everybody.
Yeah.
So like he was a football player jock, but he was cool.
He was nice to everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't like the jock that's popular and he's a dick to everyone. Like he was cool.
Yeah.
And so he's got like the sheepdog. So him and Alice, Dan, right?
Yeah, Dan
And
Jordan.
Dan Jordan, yeah, they get together, and apparently they did some stuff that maybe their parents wouldn't have liked them to do, and so she's pregnant now. And that's the thing. Well, no, I'm sorry. What am I saying?
Exactly.
She didn't get pregnant from him.
Exactly.
God,
That's
edit
what.
that out.
Yeah. No. But that's what they show. But your take was something else, because I had always saw it as her and Dan making love, and she has a baby, and that's it. But you're like, but you're like, no. Well, she's having sex or making love, but it's not to Dan. It's to.
What happens is it's to Freddy, because here's what happened. And I kind of caught this the first time I watched this, and then the second time I watched this, like, oh yeah, because here's what it is. Remember, she's in bed, she's having a dream that she's having sex with Dan. But Freddy, remember, he gets into your dreams. Yeah. So now if he's in her dreams, he now poses as Dan, because he has that power to pose other people, as we've seen in previous ones. He impregnates her with the child.
Exactly, and that was the part that I was like, wow, I've never seen anyone's take like that, because like everyone else, like this is what you'll see anywhere else, is that Alice and Dan, they have she gets pregnant, and then Freddy's trying to use the baby as the one to use his dreams to get into the real world, which is kind of like, oh, okay. But then when you take it as, I mean, if you're gonna buy that bullshit, then you might as well buy that, oh no, Alice had sex, but the sex is really with Freddy, and now the baby she's gonna have is Freddy. That's how Freddy's gonna be able to come into the real world, and that's how the baby's like half Freddy with the way they show him. And I was like, wow, that's interesting, because from at least the shit that I've heard, I've never heard anyone think of it that way. And
well, it gives it away, because here's the thing, and I don't mean to cut you off, but
you're good.
It gives it away, because here's the thing. You remember in that sex scene at the beginning of the movie, he turns his face and you see Freddy, and then she's led into the shower. She gets suffocated by all that water. Yeah. Then she finds herself in that, what I describe like if people want to know what hell's like, that's hell, is that mental institution where all those people are rambling, walking around, and they've got guards at an elevated level watching them up. That's hell.
Yeah.
And then she finds herself there, and then remember, you see Robert Englund make that cameo.
Yeah, as
like
one of the maniacs. Yeah, one of the maniacs.
One of the maniacs. Yeah, and that's the thing. So it kind of clicked with me there. I was like, You see Freddy's face having sex with her when he turns aside. You see Robert Englund in the asylum, and then, but it didn't. I didn't totally 100% make the connection yet. And the whole time I'm watching the movie, all the way to about the 1 hour mark, I'm starting to think to myself, this is so dumb. How does Freddy have the power to get into the real world when people aren't asleep having dreams?
Yeah.
And then it clicked. And it clicks when the doctor explains the child can be in the dream state for 70% of the time in the fetus. And so then if Freddy is who banged her, and if Freddy is who got her pregnant, and if the child is part Freddy, then if the child is in the dream state, Freddy is entering the world through the child who is in the world in the womb.
I'm blown away, dude. Yeah, I was just kind of like, wow, that's pretty cool I mean, if you're going to say that Freddy's taking over a child, you might as well just go say that, Alice had sex with Freddy in her dreams or whatever, and now she's pregnant, or, whatever the fuck, right? And, because it only makes sense when you kind of like sit there and think about it, because as soon as she's done, like you said, she goes straight into a dream sequence where she's in that asylum, and all that other crazy shit starts happening, and it just to me it just makes more sense when you think of it that way, rather than, oh, she had sex with Dan and all of a sudden she's like not pregnant yet, but she's just basically pregnant, and she starts dreaming about Freddy now all of a sudden. So anyway, this film is kind of all over the place, and there's not a real crazy plot to it the way the other ones are. No surprises, other than it starts off with Dan and Alice, getting themselves over, and she wakes up, like everything you explained, and they're in the asylum, and she's pregnant, and they kind of like touch upon like abortion and shit like that on the film, where they're like, well, if you get rid of the baby, the baby, there's no Freddy and all this and that. So they kind of touch upon that, and she's like, no, they're not gonna get my baby, were fucking my choice and all that shit. So
that and 'cause that is the part that like grabbed me. Even the first time I watched it, before I rewatched it, I was like, "There's it." When you get past the halfway mark of this film,
yeah,
there's a lot of pro-life overtone themes in this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like I said, they kind of throw it in there, and I never really thought about it till like you get older and you see that you're like, yeah, like, and then when Dan's parents are there and they're like, well, we have a claim on it too, and she's kind of like, it's it's a boy, his name's Jacob, it's not an it or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean, like, and yeah, it kind of like touches on like real world shit, and they all kind of do all the Freddy films just a little bit, like the teen suicide and shit like that, and in part 3, so they always kind of like, and like that's what kind of like takes away from this film a little bit, is like they talk about not like a major thing, but they're like talking about getting rid of the baby and things like that, and it's kind of like, man, I just want to see Freddy killing people and shit.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, it's okay. The part that got me in the feels, as Conrad Thompson is taking to saying now, the part that got me in the feels in this movie is it's such a dumb, I don't want to say inconsequential, but such a just part. It's a part that's flowing for most people. They're not stopping thinking about it, but it got me, and I'm going to explain to you why. When she goes with Yvonne to the clinic, and apparently Yvonne is a part-time candy striper at this clinic.
Yeah.
And the doctor, and the doctor is there, and he's kind of breaking her balls. He's breaking Alice's balls about, is this why you came here to get a sonogram done?
Yeah.
And
he's got the eyebrow raised.
Yeah, he's doing the Christopher J. Smartest man in the room. Yeah. But the thing, can you imagine if I was a doctor, what a dick I would be?
It's Dr. Chris. So, just so you know that.
Yeah, just so you know. But the thing is, like, when he breaks her balls, and then she says to him, in kind of like an innocent, pleading way, and just says to him, well, I'm just looking out I just want to make sure my baby's okay. And you know why that got me? Is because I know how I am. I know how I can be with people sometimes. And I know I can kind of get impatient, and I know I can kind of get annoyed easily. And I know I can sometimes break balls here and there when maybe I shouldn't. And sometimes it takes someone in an innocent way pleading an honest case, a legitimate grievance case or case, whatever like that, to get me to stop and take a step back and say, you know what, maybe I am being a little too hard. Maybe I do need, maybe I need to cool off a little bit,
Yeah, maybe I just need to go to the ice house, grab me a Nacho Libre, daddy.
And I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I'm just gonna go admit, just people listen, but I don't care, dude. I kind of just had one, as people say, one man tear kind of go down my eye when I saw that part. It touched me. It really did.
Yeah, no, there's some things I always get emotional for like 3 different movies, and people are gonna be like, what and why? But I'll talk about it once we talk about them, because we will talk about them. It's the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. It's Conan the Barbarian, and it's RoboCop. Like those 3, like they always get me all worked up. I'm like, son of a bitch, and maybe it's because I've known those movies ever since I was a little kid, and like it just kind of like it's something that's kind of prolonged, and all the things you build, everything, and they all kind of the emotion of the film and the ups and downs of the film and whatever. So
nowhere, no way, no
But yeah, those kinds of films, like they have they'll touch the heart a little bit, and there's certain things on certain films that'll do that for me. So that did that for you in this one, huh?
Yeah, and I mean, it's just, you think about it, it sounds, the person who's not in the know listening to this would hear that and would say, well, gosh, that's so dumb. I mean, how could a Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger, a horror movie do that? So you just, if you're really following the story, and if you're really observing the emotion of what people are saying and how they're saying it and what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah. When you follow the emotions on shit, then it's like completely different, and you're engulfed in the story. And but we gotta get to the kills, because this is the part that everyone loves to hear about. And like, this is what we came for, dude, for the Freddy kills. No, before we get to the kills, let's get to Freddy. Doesn't he look fucking ridiculous in this film?
I remember you saying that in the prior one, and I mean, he does look different, but it didn't throw me off.
It didn't bother you, okay? Well, again, too, I've been watching Freddy for years too, and like, I can tell. I know most people, they probably won't tell the difference, but I can see, like, if you show me a picture of just Freddy's face, not anything else about the scene, just Freddy's face or the skin that he's using, I could tell you, oh, that's from Freddy 1, that's from Freddy 2, that's from Freddy 3, that's from 4, because they're all different, you know what I mean? At least that's how hardcore I am with the Freddy mask. And so when I saw this, I'm like, man, Freddy looks like fat, and they like it's a mixture of part like 1 and like, I guess maybe like the newest Freddy, but it's like it just looks weird, the newest Freddy, the 2009 remake, which we'll get to, but it just looks weird. He looks chunky in the face, and the makeup kind of bothers me. It looks like he's like almost like dry, like, you know what I mean? Like, he looks weird. It just looks weird. But anyway, everyone kind of like says like, oh, well, part 5 and 6, like, Freddy gets a little too jokey. Like, I don't have a problem with Freddy being like jokey, you know what I mean? Because like, to me, that's who Freddy is like, I understand he's supposed to be evil and shit, but it's like, out of all the evil characters that we have in the horror world, he's the only one that has like a real personality, when you think about it, right? So I always get a kick out of Freddy and the lines he says, like, especially like the first kill when he kills Dan, unfortunately, when he's there like in the truck. And I remember being a kid, like, being afraid but kind of like chuckling at the same time when, he's there with the wine bottle going to go pick up Alice, and then Freddy like is chugging the wine. He goes, "Bad year, Dad." I was just like, what the fuck? Like, even as a kid, like, I thought that was hilarious. "Bad year, Dad." And then like, he like pours it on his, like, he rips off his arm and then he pours it on the fucking like the fucking cut or the wound,
Yes.
And that's like a fucked up scene. But I'll get to my part, but what did you like that first kill where he kills Dan, or did it fucking freak you out or anything? That motorcycle scene in the beginning?
It didn't freak me out or scare me or anything like that. I just thought it was like, I remember the when he becomes the motorcycle,
Yeah.
And facially I don't know what you would call that on a motorcycle, but and he does that and he kills him off, and I'm like, man, he's killing off a major character early. Okay, he's trying to establish some heat early, as we would say in wrestling.
He's trying to establish some heat early. Yeah, dude, fuck yeah, he's trying to establish that heat. I didn't expect that at all, because like, after part 1 and you see everyone like come back, and then right away, they do the psycho and like knock somebody out that's like the main star, and I was like, wow, didn't see that one coming. I've told the story before on the other podcast, I'm pretty sure, but when I was a kid, we had a few VHSs, and I was going through them as I was like 4 years old at the oldest, and I remember putting on the VHS of this one, and my dad was cleaning out the closet, putting shit away, and I saw that, and I was like, I'm gonna put this on, and it was that scene, and just so happened to be like, where fucking Freddy's like the motorcycle, and he's like got the wires going into Dan's forearms, and Dan's like yelling, and Freddy's like, all that shit. And I started screaming like, "Oh my god!" Like,
see, and that I didn't get that freaked out about it. I mean, but if anything, like, I guess it taught me that Freddy Krueger is secretly a huge mark for Bruce Lee, because apparently, like, you put Freddy into a motorcycle, it become the motorcycle.
It become the motorcycle. It's funny because I was thinking, I'm like, well, it's just gonna be me and Chris. How are we gonna keep this entertaining? Because we're kind of like, Chris gets philosophical like Bruce Lee, and I'm glad you threw a Bruce Lee reference. But I was also gonna talk about like I've seen this movie, so many times, Part 5, and I've seen it so many times that like I really don't care to see it anymore. You know what I mean? Because I've really seen it that many times growing up that this one and Part 4, they're not my favorites, but I've probably seen them like well over 200 times. Because like back then, you would just if you had a VHS and you only had 10 VHSs, well, chances are you were probably gonna watch that same motherfucker a few times. You know what I mean? Because back then cable wasn't worth a shit or regular TV. And I was thinking about when I had said that, and I was thinking about what we're going to talk about, and I was all like reminiscing about the past, and I was all like, oh, I'm going to start singing a Day in the Life with the Beatles. Yeah. There are places I remember, all the whatever the fuck, and I was like, man, me and Chris like the Beatles and shit. So, but yeah,
some are dead and
some are living. And people and friends we still can recall. Bam, bam, bam. Yeah, I was like, we're just gonna do a bunch of references to the past and all the different shit. And yeah, it was one of those things. I was like laughing about it. I was all like, man, dude, fucking Beatles reference, and then you come with the Bruce Lee reference. And but yeah, I see this movie so many times, and yeah, that intro always got me right away. And Dan dies, right away, right off the fucking bat. And this one, it's kind of like an anemic Nightmare on Elm Street, in pun intended, I guess, because you got the next one with Greta dying. There's only a few deaths in the film. The girl who's like the model, whatever, and she's pretty fine. I remember even being as a kid, like I didn't think she was fine, but of course you get older and you're like, she's pretty hot,
No, who I thought is fine as fuck in this movie is fucking Yvonne.
Shut the fuck up. You really?
Yes. Oh God, yes.
You like Yvonne?
Fuck yes.
I hate Yvonne's hat, dude. That hat she wears when she's in a warehouse with Mark, dude. But so Yvonne over Greta, huh? That's her name, right? Greta?
Yeah, Greta. Well, I mean, when you see Yvonne like early in the movie,
yeah,
like they I don't know how they're doing her hair or whatever it is, but she is fine as fuck.
She's got a nice tone to her, dude. She's black, right? But she don't look black. She looks like
I think she's biracial.
Yeah, she looks like she's Indian almost, or Arab, something like that. She just looks weird. She looks different than your average girl, man. And but yeah, she does look biracial, dude. And but anyway, she came out in a lot of 80s movies. I don't know a lot of them, but I've seen her, like I can't remember them off the top of my head. But I know she comes out in I think maybe The People from Under the Stairs. I don't remember, but
Kelly Jo Minter, I think is the real name.
Kelly Jo Minter, and she came out in a lot of films in the '80s and shit. But anyway, Greta, she's like the model. And they also touch upon that, I guess. Girls are people with anorexia, and they force feed her. And then Freddy again with the quotes. He's like, "Bon appetit, bitch," and all that. Yeah, and then Freddy's just saying like a bunch of one-liners, second helping, and madam, if I may, and it's just like, man, they just like this whatever random shit you can say, like fucking let's just throw it on this motherfucker, you know what I mean?
Well, that's going to let's see that right there is doing a little too much comedy. And I mean, it's fine to be funny. It's fine to have an occasional this was the complaint I had when we did the podcast about Affinity Wars. Is like. It's just like it's constant comedy, and in this one and in the fourth one, Freddy is just constant comedy. But the thing too is like if you notice, this follows with the beginning of the movie when they're at the graduation and Greta's like, what is it, a candy cane or a lollipop or some shit? Her mom's all, Greta, or is that going to get you on the front cover of a magazine?
Yeah. I laughed when people probably will miss it, but of course, like I wrote little notes down. When Greta, like when Alice opens up the fridge when Greta's dying and like Greta's reaching out and Freddy grabs her and pulls her back in, on the to-do list it says die bitch. I was like how stupid is that? But it's like great, like it's perfect, like that's Like, it reminds me of part 3 when she's all like, "Let him go, you asshole," when Joey's in the coma, and then Freddy slices in Joey's stomach. Come get him, bitch.
Or what is it when when she's watching the TV's all, and it's Dick Haven's all, well, can I go ahead and ask you a question? Who gives a fuck what you think?
Yeah, who gives a fuck what you think? Yeah, exactly. Like, that's what makes Freddy, like, I understand you don't want too much jokes like, "Madam, may I," and all that shit or whatever. Like, but the "come get 'em, bitch," and you know, "die, bitch." Like, those are funny because it seems like Freddy wouldn't have any respect for anybody, especially women, you know. So for him to be like all ugly to him and shit, it's like that's his like Al Bundy of horror like characters, you know what I mean? Like, you know, so I always get a kick out of when he's saying some stupid bitch reference, and it's like, as the other, like, you notice, like, Freddy never really like fucks with guys as much as he does with girls. Like, the girls he gets more off fucking with them, you know what I mean? Because it's like they're chicks and shit, or women.
But logically that makes sense because think about it from the origins perspective. If the origin story of this character Freddy Krueger is that he was allegedly a child molester and did this to these kids, and then he got burned by the pack. Now, a guy that does those kinds of things, or alleged to have done those kinds of things, and then the mob turns against him and has him
allegedly. You're good. Freddy's lawyer over here.
Freddy's lawyer, I was Chris Karen, attorney at law. No, but someone like that, is that the kind of person that generally does well with women as a teenager or 20-something? No. So then he's going to be carrying that resentment with him. So it's probably going to be more of a getting off, so to speak, by doing that to women than doing it to men.
Yeah, exactly. And then our final kill of the fucking movie, it was a quick one, is Mark, dude. You know, not Marky Dangerously, but the Mark comic book guy in the film. And in the film, him and Yvonne are kind of like, Yvonne doesn't believe what's going on, and Mark like right away believes it because he shows up in a dream, right, of Alice, and he sees the house or whatever, and his hands are like cut or some shit, and he wakes up. He believes that Freddy's real, and then he's like turns into that what is that motherfucker's name? The comic book hero.
Yeah, I should have taken notes on this. I should know this, but I know what you're saying, and so he gets drawn into a dream where him and Freddy together are in this cartoon comic world doing combat.
Yeah, and it's like, what the fuck?
that threw me off. I just gotta say that I was like, oh, come on, when I saw that.
Yeah, I was like, as a kid, I thought that was pretty cool when you're like, you know, like 5, 6, or 7. You're like, oh, he's a superhero. But I mean, like, and it's kind of like it's almost like the Dream Warriors, but it's like ridiculous because it's like, it looks like shit too, you know, because Freddy turns into Super Freddy.
That's what it was. That's what it was, Super Freddy, and I was like, oh, come on, are you kidding me? Like, that's what I was thinking to myself.
Yeah, he's all like, it's Super you know, like faster than a bastard maniac, and you know, saying a bunch of stupid shit, you know. You know, fucking, he says like a bunch of stupid ass lines, and I'm like, oh my god, are these guys serious? But
that happened. You know when that happened? That happened when, what's her name? When Alice goes to that bunk bed, and she wants to go to sleep so she can go to that asylum and find Amanda.
Exactly.
So then Mark, I think, you know, when you're that fucked with in the head and you're kind of getting a little not sleeping great night after night, eventually that kind of environment of someone being asleep and you just sitting there, you're going to start dozing off too, and he gets dragged into this fucking comic book battle with Freddy. That's when that happens. I forgot.
Yeah, exactly. When she goes looking for Amanda, which in this film, Amanda Krueger, Freddy's mom, is like way younger and shit, and you know, so probably because you know, no one wanted to see a 60 or 70-year-old woman give birth to Freddy Krueger. So, his name was the Phantom Prowler, dude. So that's why the Phantom Prowler, dude, the fucking with the gimmick mask over his head. Phantom Prowler is what Mark's character, comic book character, is called, and he tries to kill Freddy. It's a time to die, you Scarface lip dick. Like, okay, tough guy, pull out your penis, you know. And yeah, Freddy just destroys him. And yeah, with Amanda Krueger, like they tell you right from the beginning of the film, which we didn't talk about, when Freddy comes back to life from that baby, which was like really disturbing. He's like, ah, and it's like, that's some weird yell, and then everything starts exploding, and Freddy comes back, and like one hand or one arm is like super long, and like it looks all weird. You're like, okay, you know. And she tells him she tells what's her name, Alice, like, you know, you have to release me from the tower, and all this and that. And Freddy, of course, saying his over-ass lines. He's just like, it's a boy, and she's like, I let you out before or whatever. I'm not gonna let you out again. And Freddy goes, we'll see, bitch. We'll just see.
and I know something like if Mark was in this, he'd be like, man, only white people call their own mom a bitch. and that's the thing, like, so the other thing that happens in that part of the movie is when Dan, you see him walk in there all mighty heroically, and for like a second I believed it was Dan, and then what happened was I realized, it clicked, wait a minute, I saw this in part 3 where he pretends to be the dad.
Yes, exactly. He's working, dude. He's working like a son of... I forgot about that until you said it, when Dan's there like, it's okay, son, you know, and all that crap. And yeah, way towards the end. Well, that's like a part, you know, like, we're not going chronologically because it's films all over the place. Like I said, we don't want to get bored going through the motherfucker. But so when Alice is like freaking out and she's in the hospital, like, she sees a little boy named Jacob who looks all fucked up and shit, and that's her son, but like he's grown up, but he's like how old do you think a kid is? Like 7 or 8?
I was thinking 7.
Yeah, in the film, and so she starts seeing him more and more as the shit's going along, and of course he's not there. I guess he's like an apparition or something, but how could he be an apparition if he's not alive yet? But he's not, okay. And so we see him like throughout the film, and he's wearing like some fucking rag around his body, and it's just weird. But towards the end, Alice is trying to like keep Freddy from completely taking him over, and it's just fucking weird, man. I don't know how you explain in the ending, because like Freddy busts out of Alice, but Alice doesn't die, and then they like become a one person, and it's like weird, dude. It's a weird ending.
But you're right. It is a weird ending, and a lot of it is like you have to wrestle with it for the logic to work out. But the thing is, that speaks to a larger thing, and I still like this one better than part 4.
Yeah.
But it's what you just said right there speaks to a larger issue with this movie, and that is that they didn't put in, I think, the time. I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you said at the beginning of this show they spent 4 weeks both filming and editing, producing. So they're not spending the time for all the money, financial resources they have. They should have used a lot more time resources to really work everything out, to get the acting good, to get everything to look good, to get everything to be more logical, to make everything make sense. If there's kinks in the storyline hose, metaphorically, then you got to work those out, because people like us, you and I are film critics in a way. So people like us are going to watch a movie with a critical eye and see those things and question it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then also, besides being delayed on time, like, they really couldn't. I mean, I think some films, they'll get a pass if they're like entertaining, like action wise or gore wise, and this film should have been a lot more gorier from my understanding. It's just they couldn't do it because of the MPAA. They were like super hardcore, especially at this time. Was, he says, came out like in 89 going into 90 with a lot of films, and that's like the motorcycle scene got edited down, and you can only imagine like all the other stuff that they were, cutting down, because this film, like you said, like I used to really like part 4, but then I go back to part 4 and you're like, and I see like the cinematography in this film where Alice is going down like the corridors, and the gothic look, and you're like, man, this film's cool. You know, it's like it doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. And they're kind of trying to like bracket off this whole new story without any of the badass characters from part 3, and it does a pretty good job. You know what I mean? Like, all you really have from part 4 is Alice and Dan. Now, what are we going to do with these two characters? You know, it's not like they were coming from part 3 to part 4 and they had Kincaid. Come on, motherfucker. Joey, you know, they had Kirsten, and, you know, and they had, you know, all that, which is a lot compared to this one, where it's like they have to kind of like come up with a whole new idea with only Alice and Dan. And what do Alice and Dan do now? Well, they should have a kid. Okay, so now what? And the kid's fucking Freddy, dude. And, you know, so it's a lot better than it used to be one of my least favorites. But I mean, like, yeah, I mean, I would have to agree with you. You know, 1 and 3 kind of go back and forth for the one spot, and then part 2. And then part 5 is probably better than part 4 for me, because part 4, like, I like a little bit more of the death scenes more, but it's kind of like the way it just seems like that film is just way too much in the spotlight, where they're even on the fucking beach in one of the scenes, you know, where it's just like too much Freddy in the light, too much, you know, over the top shit. And this one, it has that darker look, that more gothic look, that more Catholic look. They even have, you know, the nuns and everything. So I like that better, because, like, what better way to defeat Freddy than with religion? You know what I mean? Then, you know, so
Yeah.
it's kind of grown on me after being one of probably my least favorite for a long time. Like, when I went back to it, looked at it, you're like, man, it's not that bad. It actually looks pretty badass. I think the acting and, you know, the short time frame kind of hurt it, of course, but it's a lot better than people give it credit for being, especially considering like what they were given, you know. So anyway, but that was Nightmare on Elm Street 5. Chris, I mean, what do you want to throw some shit out there about Nightmare on Elm Street 5? Anything else you want to talk about on the film, man?
I mean, just, you know, I enjoyed watching it once it clicked. Once I kind of understood what was going on and why. I think the concept was great, as far as get Freddy to have more power to do more in the real world by having him impregnate somebody. I mean, that's a solid starting concept. It's a solid foundation. I think that they didn't put in the time and the mental energy and the mental effort to really make it a fantastically unfolding story. I like the pro-life themes. As a pro-life guy, as a Catholic guy, I like... you know, I like going to Amanda Krueger, I mean, this is a dead woman now, and then they're reaching out through the dead realm to bring her in to help her out. That's pretty cool, too. I just think, again, like you said, because they were so short on time, there were a lot of kinks linear logically that they couldn't work out and should have.
Yeah, I mean, if they were said, hey, you know, let's make a film, you're going to have, you know, double the time frame, you're going to have double the editing time frame. You know, we're not going to completely edit the fuck out of this film where you can't have any gore, which is, you know, which Freddy's, you know, gets him over. Then I think it would have been a much better film, and it's still good. Like I said, it used to be one, like my least favorite is the remake, and then it would be this one. But I go back to it, I'm like, wow, this film's. I mean, like, yeah, there's certain things I don't like about it, but it's like it's still a good watch. It's still like a cheesy, you know. You put it on, you have some popcorn, maybe a Domino's pizza, you know, a beer or two, and you have a good time. You have a good time, man. You know, it's fucking weekend.
Exactly. It's a fun, for that type of night, it's a fun kind of movie for that type of night. I totally agree. And also to lend, I think you gave some good context and good perspective. That's going to be, if there's younger listeners that are younger than me and yourself, this will be lost on them. But I remember being, you know, in elementary school in the early 90s when it was still a thing, like, oh my gosh, it's an R-rated movie. Wow, that's so edgy. It's like nowadays, you know, 6-year-olds are watching radar movies on their parents' Roku. But, you know, back then it was like, ooh, it's an R-rated movie. And, you know, you had to go to Blockbuster to rent shit. So, I mean, it's like, and you go to Blockbuster to try to rent an R-rated movie, you got to be an adult. And it's just so different now in the environment we're in now. Or, like, the fact that they spent $8 million on this movie. I mean, that's a lot of money back then. But the thing is, what's lost on people is you hear about all these big blockbuster movies and they spend $100 million, $200 million to make them. But you got to understand, back then, $8 million was a big budget for a movie.
It was, dude. And I like how every time you do your deep voice, every time you do it, it sounds like Shawn Michaels. Can I have something to make me smile?
And then the cute little Indian woman will put a smiley face on my coffee.
So there you have it, folks. Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. We'll be doing more of these things soon. We're going to do Freddy's Dead, the new Nightmare. I don't know if it'll be next week. We might do something, just to mix it up next week. But we'll definitely be doing Nightmare on Elm Street, 6 soon. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And Chris, any last words for all the fans out there, especially ones would start with the N like November?
Heartbreak Kid.